Hello, and this is the fourth episode of Skinny to Strong. Firstly, I would like to say a massive thank you for all the feedback, the messages, even just asking for other guests on and whatnot. It's been absolutely amazing response so far, and keep it coming. This podcast is here to serve you. Today we have Steve Hall. Steve Hall is a natural bodybuilder. He's an online coach and owner of Revive Stronger. Steve has a pretty inspirational story, and he's literally went from skinny from a health point of view to now very strong. So I'll leave it to Steve. So Steve, tell the guys a little bit about your journey to date.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me on. And skinny to strong as a spot in my heart for sure. And to round it up a bit quicker than I think I end up rambling about my background is to just introduce kind of where Revive Stronger, the brand, came from, was because I kind of saw myself having revived stronger. I kind of came from a place of really bad health and managed to actually step on stage, on a bodybuilding stage, and kind of proved that I'd kind of got over my illness and my bad health. And what actually happened was, it was during my time at university. I was always very active. I loved the gym. I did like running club, rowing club. Like I played football and everything. I wasn't a bodybuilder or anything back then. But on one of my kind of traditional runs, I was kind of doing this 10K. I remember like looking down at my Garmin watch. I had like my heart strap on, and I was on for like an all-time PB. And I was super excited. And I was at the crossing, or at a crossing, and it was flashing amber. And I was like, right, I'm going to go because I want to make this PB. And unfortunately got hit by a van. And I kind of laugh about it now, and I kind of shrug it off. And I don't often share this story to a huge number of people. I kind of don't like to rely on it as like a selling point or anything like this. But during that kind of recovery period, I suffered with kind of a lot of long-term poor health consequences, because I think it was a bruised pituitary gland, and that led to low testosterone. It led to poor balances with my sodium levels. I was on fluid restriction. I was on medication for a good number of years after that accident. And during that time, I lost in hospital. I think I went in somewhere around 170 pounds and came out like close to 130. So I was very, very skinny when I came out. And I was really kind of, when you get injured and when you get and you lose all that weight, my confidence was zero. I had very little confidence, and I kind of became very insular. And this is where I found kind of bodybuilding, and I searched up how can I like build my body to make myself look better again, because I was just like a rake. Like literally, I was skinny when I went into hospital. I was super skinny when I came out. So I searched all these different things. I found out about like bulking and this sort of thing, and I definitely did it the wrong way initially and just pounded food. And I was like, if I don't gain, like I was aiming to gain something like half a stone in like 2 weeks or in a week. Like if I didn't, I just pound more food. This was me, 130 pounds, like eating like 3,000 to 4,000 calories a day. But in my head, I was like, it's all clean. It was all like healthful foods. So I'm not getting fat. Like you can't get fat from eating clean food. It's just impossible, apparently. But I soon found out it wasn't. And after doing all of that, also going through then a cut later on where I was doing like keto, kind of doing it all the wrong way, but still making some progress, because I was kind of basically a novice, and was doing some of the major things right. So like training hard, with weights, doing big compound lifts, even if my form wasn't very good, making sure to have lots of protein, things like this. I was getting the majors right.
Just effort?
Sorry?
Would you say even just effort?
Yeah, effort is huge. I mean, you can't underestimate effort. The amount of people you see in the gym right now, like, who don't even look like they're putting in effort, and they don't change because they don't actually stress the body enough. So yeah, great point there, Ben. And then basically I ended up thinking, right, I bulked up, didn't go very well. I cut down, it didn't go that well. There must be a better way to do this. And this is when I then searched further, and I came across people like Aaron Aragon and Lyle McDonald. And then I came across, I think, Matt Ogus on YouTube, and then found like 3DMJ because he was coached by Eric Helms. I started listening to what they were doing, and I was like, didn't seem like possible if it fits your macros, and like these sort of concepts were very foreign to me, and they went against kind of my previous teachings from like very old school bodybuilding logic. But I started implementing the stuff that they were putting out. I saw amazing results, and I even took it so far to then step on stage in 2014, and kind of that was the reason I wanted to do it, was partly because I'd seen like 3DMJ, and they were inspirational, but it was very much to prove to myself that I was kind of fully recovered from my accident, which really were some of the darkest times of my kind of life. And I actually stepped on stage like with striated glutes at like 160 pounds. So I had 30 pounds more on me by that point.
Oh, no.
So it was quite a journey. So if, like you said beforehand, like anyone who is skinny who wants to get strong, if you're listening to this and you're thinking you're struggling, it can be done even if you are coming from a really poor health background. You just need that effort. Effort is huge. So that's really where Revive Stronger came. And then from there, I really wanted to help the people we're talking to on this podcast, those skinny guys who potentially they were even looking at lots of supplements, looking at potentially even drugs, very confused, trying everything, putting in a lot of effort in the wrong areas. And I really wanted to direct them into the right areas. And that's where Revive Stronger kind of grew from, because I started helping out people in my local gym as a PT. And then those guys wanted to work online, and I started growing an audience via that. And now I have Revive Stronger, an online coaching company, and I work with kind of bikini athletes, bodybuilders, and I've competed another time since 2014. And yeah, it's just amazing to have kind of be where I am today. Now interviewing like Eric Helms on my own podcast, it's like a dream come true. It's kind of crazy.
Awesome, man. Absolutely awesome. And I love that. There's two things that really I would like to talk about a wee bit more from that, which I think the listeners will get a lot from. So the one thing you said about was this all gave you confidence. You were in a low confidence state. Now, not saying now you're running around right in the streets with your top off, but you're more confident than what you were, and it gave you a lot, just not just from the physical point of view, but a lot to your life. So like, did that happen over years? What was a stepping stone to not feeling so confident, feeling a bit more confident? Because I would say for myself it would be the exact same thing. The reason why this podcast called Guy Talk is because I do want to talk about some things like that. I don't want it just always seem like it's just a podcast for testosterone and lifting heavy and eat protein. Like I do want to open it up a wee bit more.
Yeah, you know what? It's a really interesting journey, because the confidence came from being able to control, and it became bodybuilding. I think a lot of the people who get into that sort of sport or into just building their body up really like control, and they like knowing that they have control over things. So bodybuilding does require a lot of control. You need to control what you're doing in the gym. You need to control what you're putting into your mouth to actually see results. And I felt very much out of control, and that gave me really, really horrible confidence, because I just felt very lost. And so by finding kind of bodybuilding, lifting weights, and I could do stuff to make my body progress, and that sense of control then gave me confidence. Kind of not in the like, it sounds a bit weird. It's not in the sense of, oh, I got more muscle and so I looked better and that made me more confident. It wasn't that at all. It was just the fact that I then felt in control of my life, in control of my health, and I could use these tools of training and nutrition to give myself confidence, because there was no kind of injury or illness that could control me in some regard like that.
Awesome, man. And I actually stress this a lot to my guys about, like, for me, definitely that sense of being in control, being a wee bit dominant, that like you're on top of things, you've got things on the right road. And the way I sort of explain it, like an analogy, is like, say you had an exam in a few months and you knew nothing about that given topic. You would dread that, and it would cause you stress. It would cause you a lot of negative feelings. But say you had been working so hard and you were on top of everything to date, you wouldn't mind that exam. You would be confident going in there. Yeah. Like you would want, let me own this shit. So yeah, 100%. Like that's what training gives me. It just gives me that sort of sense of I've got everything under wraps here. And then the other thing I want to like talk about, what you said, was you opened your eyes up to the likes of 3DMJ, Alan Aragon, Lyle McDonald. Now us guys, especially when it comes to the gym, right? If you go into any like public gym and whatnot, you'll see a guy who's been doing the same thing for years on years, and they're so stuck in the right way that that's the only way, that they never open their thinking to anything else. Like, talk me through that, because I have a way, and I think, right, that's the way, I've been doing it like this and stuff. And what makes you believe that other way might actually be beneficial?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a transition there, because I know when I first saw this sort of information, I vividly remember not liking Alan Aragon. I remember seeing his stuff and being like, this guy, what's he talking about? I can't include like Pop-Tarts in my diet or whatever it might be. But fortunately, I do, and I have always come from a background of kind of science. I've always enjoyed like biology at school and things like this. And so it did interest me. And it wasn't like they were saying stuff that didn't make sense. It certainly made sense. And I was like, what's the worst that can happen? Like right now, and actually, the way I was dieting back then, there's no way I would have competed. There's no way I would still be competing now because it wouldn't have been able to be a sustainable lifestyle. And I see this a lot of times with like bodybuilders. They do like one show and then they're like, nah, it's not for me. That's like way unsustainable. And I think a lot of people have the view of bodybuilders as being like very strict and controlled with everything. But there's actually a high degree of flexibility, or there can be. And it's actually really beneficial because it allows for that long-term adherence. So I really just allowed myself to be open to their suggestions, because why not? What I was doing was maybe not seeing the best results, and I kind of felt like there must be a better way of doing things. And then I saw evidence, like you see the guys at 3DMJ, saw they were getting great results. There's a lot of people doing it, and I was kind of like, well, what's the worst can happen? I started like transitioning, so I was like, oh, post-workout, I'll allow myself a bit of kind of cereal or something. It's a bit naughty. I have some jam on some rice cakes. And now I pound the stuff. But back then I was like, oh, okay, like this, I haven't like seen worse results via this. It's actually going all right. And then I kind of embraced it. And then the further you get into kind of the realm of those sort of individuals who talk a lot of sense, they don't just kind of just talk about it from their own experience. They've kind of got clients they've worked with, they've got results, but then they've also got the studies to back up what they're saying. And I think that was kind of just the fact I was open to it is so important. And you don't have to trust it straight away, but just kind of testing it out on yourself. You are your own case study in that sense.
So if, for example, we've got a guy and he's thinking, he's listening to this and he's thinking, right, I see this guy's doing something else. So the main things that you covered there was, first, don't be afraid to listen, because what's the worst that can happen? You might gain something. You might just hear someone's experience. If that person's got a portfolio of results time after time after time, and with people in the same sort of situation as you, whether it be if you're a dad and you've the way to do things, or whether it be you're wanting to get up on stage or getting in a show, same sort of lifestyle and same sort of thing that you're wanting, and then can they back it up from themselves, and also can they explain it from an evidence point of view? So if there's someone listening to that, like, if so you're presented with, right, try this type of training, try this type of diet, make sure all those four things are in consider are basically there, and then go ahead and try it. What's the worst? If we've got all those four things, then that's the proof's in the pudding. So it is.
Yeah, and I think if people are listening to it, you just think like there's so many different diets out there like available. It's actually kind of ridiculous how many there are available, and they've all sold. People have all got results of all of them. So it's not like there's only one best way to do things. So the results factor is key. If they've got clients who are giving them testimonials that are positive and they've got results, then, I mean, they could be doing a few things better maybe, but the overall experience is people are getting results, and that's what people are coming for. And if they've got something positive to say, then why not try what that person is saying?
100%. Right. So, Steve, I ask every guest this. So Ben's 3Bs. So what is your best training moment to date?
Wow. I don't actually, you know what, training...
Well, training, physique, like this whole fitness thing, it can be on stage, it can be in a gym, it can be your first 100-kilo bench press. Yeah.
So for me, I mean, I love training, don't get me wrong, but the biggest achievement for me was probably this past season, competition season, and it wasn't any of the trophies, it wasn't any of the placings, but it was to have my girlfriend tell me that it wasn't hell, which sounds really funny, but I'm so proud of myself in terms of actually planning, because there was no point at which I felt like I had to control my emotions, or had to like not be diet fatigued. I actually set myself up so well this last prep that there was no point in which I really felt like death, apart from a few tests, which I won't get into, where I felt like death. But for the majority, and I can kind of learn from those lessons where I did feel like death, that she didn't hate me. And in my first prep, she did. So that my actual overall aim for my last season was for her to be cool with it and actually not hate the fact that I'm a bodybuilder, and it become kind of sustainable in that regard. So that was my biggest achievement, I think, actually.
And you were lean really early out. I remember I was on a walk and I was listening to your podcast with AJ and stuff, and like they were telling you that you're ready and like lean, and you actually just had to you're the last sort of 8 weeks. Most people are kind of stressing, am I going to be ready? But you were just chilling.
Yeah, no, completely. I've learned so much in the last few years, and I put it to practice, and it worked out. And yeah, that gave me a lot of confidence for helping out clients in future as well.
And then, man, what's your best life moment?
Best life moment? Wow. I think because we're talking on this podcast and I'm kind of thinking health and fitness, probably bringing over Mike Israetel for the second time.
Yeah.
The first time was great, and that was with Mike Samuels, but the second time was amazing. And I actually presented as well on that day, but we were fully booked. It was all done by Revive Stronger. There was no one else kind of helping us there, and it went tremendously well, and we still get fantastic feedback from that. So yeah, to date, that's probably my proudest moment.
That is a big achievement. If anyone hasn't heard of Mike Israetel, he's basically one of the biggest guys within the world. Like, he's over in America, and he's very big within muscle building. His sort of views are very interesting, and he sort of leads the way in regards to that. So that's a very big achievement to bring him over to the UK and stuff. And then, man, what's your biggest lesson?
Ooh, biggest lesson, just life lesson, or kind
anything,
of
man.
Training lesson,
coaching, training, business, life, anything.
To be honest, and this approaches training, nutrition, everything. Be you. As soon as you try and be someone else, or you try and do it someone else's way, and you're trying to kind of fit a mold, it never works. So whether that's like try and squat like someone else, no, fit your own squat form. Try and like someone else's dietary approach, no, stick to what's working for you. Or business wise, like if you are someone who's very kind of open and social and interactive, do that. Don't try and be fake and like be someone else that you've seen on social media that you think you should be like. That's my biggest life lesson, because as soon as I kind of embraced and kind of, and this is going to sound really cringe, like embraced and loved myself for who I am, like I got so much more out of things, and like people just ended up liking who I was better, because it just comes across more genuine.
That is one thing I would definitely say that attracted me to your work. Earlier last year, I actually reached out to Steve about helping getting the online set up and whatnot, and I'd been following him for a good while. And what I liked about him was that he just got on Snapchat and he just went for a walk every morning, answered questions, had a bit of a joke, just took the piss out of things now and again. I remember the Oats Bowls. Yeah, and it was just his own unique day, his own unique way of doing things, and yeah, so 100%. Definitely be yourself is a really big point. So last week we had on Josh Coyle talking about how to get shredded, how to get lean. Now, jumping into the content, we're going to talk about gaining. And I don't think this gets enough surface. I don't think it gets enough talking about. I don't think people delve into the problems. At the end of the day, like a lot of guys listen to this, like when like you will be in a gaining stage for 2/3 of the time of training. Like if you're training for 10 years, like I would easily want someone to be gaining majority of the time in that 6-7 years. Like you want to predominantly year round be in a surplus phase. So you do. So Steve, what is gaining? What is a gaining phase? What's putting on muscle mass phase? Like just outline the definition really on what we're trying to achieve.
Cool, yeah, and I completely agree. The kind of bulking, massing phases when you're trying to actually put on muscle mass, I think is actually something that doesn't get talked about enough, considering it's actually what most of us are trying to do the majority of the time, is to get bigger. Like our goal is to normally get bigger. It's not necessarily to like be shredded all the time. So for me, a gaining phase for the majority of people who aren't kind of novice or newbies, they're kind of intermediate lifters who are actually kind of, they understand the term gaining and bulking and massing and that sort of thing. It is to start off with, like, to be specific about it, it is gaining weight. So you have to think about actually being in a calorie surplus and gaining weight. Like if you're not providing that, you're kind of using, you're not using even the most powerful tool that there is to gain, because you could be doing all the hard work in the gym and then not fueling it with nutrition, and that in itself is highly, highly valuable. So for me, yeah, gaining phase is typically you're actually gaining weight on the scale over time, and you're working progressively harder and harder in the gym. I guess that's typifies kind of a gaining phase.
Right. So I'm a massive fan of, for example, if someone wants something, they have to first know what they want. They need to sort of visualize it and kind of be possess certain thought processes to get there. So someone's on this, they've done their first ever diet, or they already naturally lean. How do they approach a gaining phase? Like, what do they do? Like, for example, they've either last 6 months dieted down and got to a point where they can see some form of abs, or they're naturally just lean and they've been training a wee bit. What do they do now to really take this to the next level and put on some muscle mass? How do they start?
Mm-hmm. So I guess we could start with like the foundational concepts of like nutrition. So if they're currently in a calorie deficit, they've just dieted down, and they're actually in a really sensitive position now. If they're lean and they're in that deficit, and they're now very kind of insulin sensitive, which is kind of like a key thing, to be honest. You want to stay insulin sensitive. That's kind of a really, really anabolic place to be. And so you can start putting in more calories, so providing a calorie surplus, and that is just eating more than your body needs to maintain. And where those calories come from don't matter massively. You probably want to keep your protein somewhat level to what you had during your period of dieting. You could get into specifics, and you would need to individualize this to like people's preferences and things. But the most important thing is you need more calories now. You're entering a gaining phase. You want to make sure you provide the fuel for your body to like add. So if you think about like a house, if you haven't got extra kind of materials to add an extension, you're not going to be building that extension. You're just going to be working very hard at maintaining what you've got. So you need to pump up the calories. So that would be the first thing you'd want to set up. And then with your training, if you're doing your dieting kind of right, quote unquote, your training won't change massively. But the key thing that will change is now you've got so much extra fuel coming in, your ability to recover from training volumes will increase massively. So something Mike Israetel is very well known for is that maximal recoverable volume, the most you can do and recover from. And this is like a good kind of thing to think about, because when we're dieting, the most we can do and recover from is significantly less. Whereas when we've got extra calories coming in, we can be glycogen full, we can replenish glycogen much quicker. This is our most powerful fuel for our training. Well, it is what's fueling our training. So we can do more in the gym. So we can progress more and more with volume, which is important during a gaining phase. It's becoming more and more clear that progressive overload with training volumes is vital for growing muscle, or our most powerful tool. And that can come from increments in load, increments in repetitions, and also like sets. So over time, we want to be doing more and more in the gym, and providing a calorie surplus. So we've got kind of that fuel, kind of, if you think about the match is the training, and then the actual kind of fuel, the gasoline or whatever, is to fuel the fire to make sure it keeps burning and growing. That's putting it in the right direction, is that calorie surplus. So I guess that's in a roundabout way where you need to think about it, the core basics.
I love that, and I love that in house analogy. I really do like that. It really will help the person resonate well. So 2 points that I want to talk about that you touched on. So what is insulin sensitivity? So the guys here, what is insulin sensitivity? Why is it better to start off lean? Like if I'm say 20%, so now percentages, there's a lot of leeway, but for most people 20% will be where you don't have abs and whatnot. Why would it not be key to bulk then to put on muscle mass? Like what is insulin sensitivity?
So it's not like an on and off switch even. So it's not like when you get to 20% body fat, you can't build muscle. Like you're insulin insensitive, and you're just like, you have anabolic resistance, might be a term that people might relate that to. Like you can still build muscle in this big body fat. 20% isn't even that high, I guess, really, for the normal person. You can still build muscle in that percentage range. But the leaner you get to a point, the more kind of insulin sensitive you get. And this is going to improve your partitioning ratio of kind of where does nutrients go? Do they go more so to muscle, or do they go more so to fat tissue? And if you become very kind of insensitive to insulin, then your partitioning ratio kind of falls less in favor of muscle and more in favor of fat. So it is kind of in your ideal positioning to be leaner, because the fatter you are, the more likely that more is going to get partitioned to fat. That isn't to say you cannot bulk when you are at that body fat percentage. It just might be wise to try and do it in the lower ends. So that's why it's important. But if people really kind of visualize it, like the people I think with the biggest fat-free mass index are like sumo wrestlers. So it's not like they're definitely not in that lower end percentage. They're still building muscle. So it isn't like an on and off switch, but it is ideally good to be a bit leaner.
Yeah, and then so the next point you talked about was maximum recovery volume, and you said about what basically you want to do is maximum amount as possible and recover from it so you can do it again. So a lot of the guys listen to this, and I still find myself repeating this a lot and a lot, is about frequency. So the amount of times that we hit a muscle within a week, within a month, within a year, and the sort of thought process. And we already talked about one evolution within the nutrition, so that we're like the whole fitness industry as a whole is become more educated, and a message coming out there about foods, and we can have the odd Pop Tart here or there and get in shape still. Now there's a transition within training that we're becoming more aware that it's not actually optimal to be doing like a bodybuilder sort of split, where we're doing like a chest day, a shoulder day, a leg day, a back day, and we're becoming more to like push and pull, upper and lower. Like at the minute I'm doing full body push, full body pull. So like talk a bit about frequency and the maximum recovery volume.
Cool. Yeah. So I think it's important to first of all outline that maximum recoverable volume isn't where you want to be training all the time. It's actually where you want to probably not spend too much time. And even if you're an intermediate lifter, you might not ever want to push to the bounds of the most you can do and recover from. Where we want to be spending most of our time is maximal adaptive volume. So this is the most volume you can do and adapt from. So you're actually improving week to week, whereas maximal recoverable volume is the point at which you can't improve. And so generally you deload there. So the way I like to see people go about things is kind of start off with the minimum you need to grow and then progressively overload towards your maximal recoverable volume, deload and repeat. I think that's a really powerful way to provide progressive overload of volume. So then in terms of frequency, a really nice way I like to visualize this is to people to think about the fact that when we're going to the gym, we are damaging muscles, because we have to damage them so that the body has a stress to then grow and respond from. And this comes from like Hans Seil of his like general adaptation theory. And that's kind of, you provide a stress, you have an adaptation, and if you provide too much of a stress or you keep stressing, you actually see a degradation, you see kind of worse results. So what we do with frequency is we want to provide enough of a stress to provide an adaptation, and then once we've adapted and we've kind of got better, we then provide another stress. So with the bro splits, often they end up being recovered for like days, and then they come into the gym and stress it again. And it's kind of, they're missing out. They could have trained chest maybe 3 days earlier because they were already recovered and improved by that point. So you're missing off like gains basically because you're not providing stress in the most optimal frequency. And you're completely right. It's becoming, widely known that 2 times per week per muscle group is very, very effective, and it's going to be more effective than 1 times per week. Now, you're not going to not grow with 1 times per week, but you can probably grow better. And these kind of stress response adaptation curves, but I really like people to visualize, are different for different people, for different training ages, for different fiber types, for different muscle groups. So when we're thinking about like our delts, like delts can take a beating very frequently. They hardly ever get sore. They can like repeat performance over and over again. So like your shoulders, you can probably train those 4 times a week and be absolutely fine. But something big like your quads, if you're trying to train those 4 times a week with a lot of volume every time, overloading each session, unless you're a newbie, you're probably going to struggle with that concept. So with your kind of frequency, you have to make sure to dose appropriately, have overload days, lighter days, and kind of there's lots of nuances you can get into it. But just think about these stress response adaptation curves. Like, when is this muscle recovered? That's probably the best time to then hit it again. And it's not going to be fully recovered, but enough to present another overload. So that's an important concept to think about.
Another point that I would like to add to that was that, so a lot of the guys who are going to be listening to this are going to be in the first 5 years of properly training, and these exercises, what we're doing. So like Steve was saying, he's doing conventional deads before this, things like squats. These are big, complex exercises, and it requires a lot of skill to be able to control different joints within your within your body, to get muscles firing, and to get those cues really locked in and knuckled down. And like, it won't be until you've actually got someone more experienced who's done this for years and years showing you how to actually go for a squat and feel everything work, or how to fine tune your deadlift and whatnot. And like that does take time. And like, I feel that as well, we need to earn the right to do those lifts, and get certain areas strong and whatnot. But doing those more frequently and training more often. Say for example, we've now got 2 to 3 leg days a week. You're gonna become a lot better just at squatting from a technique point of view.
Yeah, no, completely. Lifting is a skill, and I don't think people recognize that. And it's probably taken me until like this year, really, the last maybe few years, where I felt like everything is good and I'm happy with the form. And it isn't like now it's good and I'm happy and I never need to relook at it. I'm always looking back, making sure it's on point. So no, lifting is a skill, and the more frequent you can practice that, then like the better you're going to get at it. And the great thing is, novices and newbies and like people under like 5 years of proper training experience can actually recover from higher frequency. So it works in perfectly like that.
Right. So you see, if someone's sitting here today, like it is, they've just got in the first few weeks of training of 2018, and you're a big fan of periodizing like a full year of training. Like, what does someone do if they want to really 2018? I want to put on some muscle mass. Like, obviously, there's gonna need to be context applied here. But what if they've got a sheet in front of them? What sort of things should they be thinking about for the next 11 months?
Mhm. No, yeah, I definitely like long-term planning, and these aren't like set in stone plans, as you probably realize. Like, they're dynamic. You need to evolve them as you go along. But I mean, for us, if we want to like optimize our year as best as possible, we can look at, when am I on holiday? When is there a wedding? When is like someone's birthday? And you can pick and choose periods of time where you might be deloading, where you might be maintaining weight, where you might be cutting. So, for example, everyone knows cutting is quite stressful. Like, being in a calorie deficit is just a stress. So if you've got periods in time where you have large stress anyway, maybe it's exams, maybe you're moving house, you probably don't want to be dieting over that period of time. So you kind of optimize your life in that sense by just having that bit of foresight, by looking ahead. But for someone who's trying to build muscle for the majority of the year, they really need to make sure that their ratios are in the right order. So actually, someone recently asked me, kind of, when we're talking about like bulking to cutting to maybe some maintenance, kind of what does your ratio look like? And I was like, well, just off the top of my head, like an 8 to 2 to 1, because you almost want to be like, I mean, 8 to 2 to 1 might sound like a lot of time gaining, but you want to be gaining for lots of period of time, because muscle building is slow. I always refer to building muscle like cycling uphill, whereas cutting is like cycling downhill.
It's just man, so these analogies are fucking on point.
They just make, I find, because as I've got to coach people, I find analogies really help settle, and make things set in. But everyone knows cycling uphill is slower, it's more difficult, it's kind of a bit of a painful process, whereas going downhill can be very quick and efficient. And so we kind of want to get in and out with our cutting, but we want to be slow and progressive with our gaining. And then there are going to be periods of time where we just want to like hold tight. Those maintenance phases, I think, are important, but very much discounted by a lot of people. But they just they're where our body wants to be. They let a lot of stress drop down, and they're perfect for periods of time where you're like on holiday, where you can't really get into the gym as frequently, or when you've got a lot going on in your life. So when you're doing your year, really just think about kind of what big events have I got coming up, when might be a good time to cut down, when might be a good time to like build up. And you can actually build in like mesocycles, and they can build upon one another, and they can potentiate one another, and really set you up for success. So that's definitely a massive thing I do for my clients when they sign up with me, is I look over their year, or maybe it's just a few months if they don't have a year of kind of know what they're doing, and just so that everything, they already know what they're doing now and in many months to come, because that really allows for things to roll in the right direction. It's kind of like a snowball, like, and you're rolling it, and it's like building momentum as it goes along. That's where you want to be.
So Steve, what is a deload? Just to clarify that.
So really simply, and this is quite cool because I recently had, and this might come out before my episode comes out, but Menno Henselmans, who many of the listeners might have heard of, Mike Israel and Eric Helms, had them on for a roundtable on deloads. So this is a really good question because they all agreed with the definition, and they might all have different ways of doing deloads. But basically, they're periods of time to reduce fatigue from training and potentially dieting as well. So typically, there's a reduction in volume and normally some intensity brought down as well. But volume is our biggest driver of kind of fatigue production. So yeah, for the most part, fatigue reduction via a drop in volume for a week or a microcycle.
Okay, and then you see, so we're on this gaining phase and we're going uphill. There's going to be a few things that are obviously going to be putting into our head. So, am I making enough progress? Am I getting too fat? How do I know I'm progressing? I've got a holiday and I want to just get lean for. But I want to invest in building muscle. Yeah, talk about it, about those struggles. So what would you say? Am I getting too fat? Let's start off with that.
So when you think about this, I think it's very individual to whether you're getting too fat or not, because some people are, if we think about body fat settling ranges, so people might have heard about this, it is more of a theory than an actual real scientific concept, but I think it very much holds true for people. So some people are just naturally lean, their settling point is lower, and this is normally a range of maybe 12 to 15% they're in and they feel good and productive, whereas other people might be a bit higher than this. And they might feel better at a different body fat percentage. And that might mean they want to be leaner, but they don't actually provide the best training stimulus, which is so important. And they might do better being a bit fatter. So that's something to take into account, kind of where are you in regards to your normal body fat percentage? So for me, if I'm up at like 20%, that's pretty damn high for me. I'd probably be feeling very uncomfortable. And it probably would be wise for me not to hang around there too long because I'm probably not getting the best performance. But for someone else who is naturally just a bigger, chunkier guy, he might be feeling really good at 20% body fat. And so he's providing great training stimulus. And so he might do okay to stay there. So that's something to take into account, first of all. But also like training years. So if you're very new to the gym, you're new to like scientific dieting, scientific training, you could probably just maintain weight or eat at maintenance, and you could end up recomping and you'd be in a good position. So you could probably build some muscle and drop some fat at the same time. Also, if you're more novice, you just have more muscle to grow, and so you can probably do with kind of continually gaining, whereas someone more advanced, maybe they're a competitor, they might not want to get too far away from their stage weight because that might make the then contest prep diet very, very difficult for them. So there's many factors to take into account, and what I would just say is keep the goal the goal. I think it's a quote from Dan John. Yeah. But many people are short-sighted and they think about kind of, oh, I'm fat now, but think about how much muscle you could be building and think about the fact where you want to be in future. Because even after like the first couple of weeks of bulking, you'll probably end up holding on to more glycogen with that more water retention. You'll look fluffier just from that standpoint. And after a while, it's basically like an easy way to put it for me is like when you think about peaking for a bodybuilding show, you're trying to avoid that spilled over look where you're holding like glycogen, not just in the muscle, but also like extra water outside of the muscles. So you actually look spilled over, you look less defined. When you're bulking, you're pretty much fully spilled over all the time because your glycogen full, you're in a surplus, so you just look not great. From a leanness standpoint, and you have to embrace the training performance, how you're feeling, the flexibility in your lifestyle, and focus on those aspects rather than focusing on all the kind of the aspects that you're losing. The grass is always greener. Everyone who's in a bulking phase wants to be cutting. Everyone who's cutting wants to be bulking. It's just typical.
So one thing you said about is being short-sighted, and I would totally agree with this. And in the first few years of training, I was so short-sighted, and like. One thing so the reason why I said about a year and I wanted you to talk about that is because I think that I would like to stress to any listener listening to this is that have delayed gratification. Like realize that it's gonna happen. You're gonna get into the really good shape. You get the work, you get out of it. Like if you put in the work, it'll show. Like someone just doesn't wake up muscular. They put the work in to get there, and if you're constantly thinking about the next few weeks or the next month or this or that, you just need to like calm down and be at ease that that desired body composition that you're wanting will come, and like there is going to be stages. So Steve mentioned about the importance of staying at the top of the hill and maintaining for a while. It's okay if you need to drop the 3 sessions a week and you're going for promotion in work, or you've got a baby on the way, or you've got exams. Like that is okay. It is short term, and probably, to be honest, like it's probably one step back and two step forwards. Like it might actually do you good, from even just a psychological point of view. Like we mentioned about stress, and stress has a massive, massive role, like stress management within your ability to gain muscle. Yes, we talked about it. We're putting our body under stress, but I'm on about psychological stress. Even like I do believe that if you're in a stress state, it's not going to be beneficial for performance,
Yeah.
and whatnot. And again, like there's 12 months in a year. Say for example, if you have one or two where it isn't go go go, and you sort of are going through the motions, that's okay. And I don't know about you, Steve, but I used to hammer myself and be a bit annoyed, and kind of as well like try to force growth in terms of going to the gym and hammer myself and get annoyed. And yeah, what would you say?
No, I agree. I think the best bodybuilders are the oldest. Natural bodybuilders, the best ones are the oldest because they've consistently followed what they need to follow and they've trusted in the process. And what we have to remember is we all wanted more muscle yesterday.
Yeah.
We all did. And the fact is, bodybuilding training is pretty boring. Like you have to do some big compound lifts. You have to do some isolation work. There's a lot of volume that has to go in. Your sessions can get quite long, and it just is more of that. You need to keep training hard and harder over time. And whatever system you set up to do that, great. But if you keep fluttering between different ways of doing it, you like jump onto this daily undulating periodization program over here, and then you try this intensity technique over here, the body's not getting a harder and harder response. It's just getting hard training that's just all over the place. It's not getting a signal for growth. So you need to just be consistent and enjoy the process, and just, yeah, take that long-term perspective. Because I know for myself, when I was dieting down initially for my show last year, I was like, have I even improved since 2014? I swear I don't even look more muscular. And then once you've stripped back the layer, you see where all your investment has gone. Whereas it just, I mean, that would be a great analogy in itself. If you're spending your paycheck every week, you're never going to be able to afford that big mansion. But if you're investing and you're saving some and putting in your back pocket all the time, then eventually you're going to be able to buy something much better, rather than just like letting it go all the time.
And even from that sort of point of view about stripping away, like for example, if you're gaining in a gaining phase, like your waist measurement will go up, and when you start to strip away, like just when you get a little bit get body fat and you get a few centimeters or a few inches off that, like you'll really realize how much muscle you've gained to your back and whatnot, and to your V taper, and yeah, it's kind of like what's hidden under there, hidden under there.
No, completely. I think some people gain weight really nicely and other people don't. And I think most people don't really gain it in the most favorable places. And so they feel like they're a lot bigger than maybe they are. And you're completely right. I mean, like I said, a lot of that water retention that comes with more glycogen storage, that goes as you deplete it. As you go into a calorie deficit after a couple of weeks, when that water weight comes off, you'll automatically look leaner right there and then.
Okay, and then you see, the more we go up the hill, right? You see this a lot. It's happening in the fitness industry. Is that like there's a view that the more body weight you gain, and the further you get into like a gaining phase, you need to ram your calories up higher and higher. And you see people getting away with 5,000 calories, and I dropped a pound this week and can't seem to gain weight and whatnot. Talk a bit about that, a bit about metabolic adaptation. Is that beneficial? Is it just stupid? Yeah.
So no, yeah, completely. And I think if any of the listeners have ever gone through one of these really long bulks where they've really pushed it, and maybe they pushed their body fat a bit high, they might be able to resonate with the feelings of constant heat, and just horror, like just being sweaty all the time, like just sitting down and like wanting to be in aircon, like windows open at night during winter, and all of these sort of assets, because the body is actually burning through. It's trying to get you back to its homeostasis where it likes to be. I mean, this is very much related to that settling point. So if your body is used to being a certain amount of muscular, having a certain amount of muscle, having a certain amount of body fat, and you're pushing it away from that, it's going to resist adaptation. Now, when we diet, we know this because it ramps down the amount of energy expenditure we do. Our NEAT comes down, so our non-exercise activity thermogenesis comes down, and so we adapt downwards. But the same happens when we go up. So when we force and we're trying to grow, now our body will resist it. It doesn't resist it as hard as when we diet down because it's not like a survival response. It's more of a don't get too fat response. And it likes being where it is. So it is easy, but you do get to a point like you described where you almost have to end up force feeding, and the body's in a state where it's just so resistant to further food coming in. And so you do sometimes have to really force feed yourself, and maybe even like cap your steps and do all sort of crazy protocols where you have to try and bring this down. But yeah, it's very much a real thing. Like any biological system, the more you try and like take it away from homeostasis, the more it will resist that kind of adaptive process.
And then now, like your calories are your calories, but say, what have you done over like a 12-month sort of period of gaining? Like, would you have started your calories on like 3,000 and ended up at 4,000, or?
So yeah, I mean, for me, I'm always monitoring my calorie intake to a certain degree of kind of accuracy. So I always kind of roughly know exactly how many calories I'm having. And same with body weight. So I'm still measuring my body weight and looking at the scale, and also taking into other considerations like how am I looking in the mirror, what are my measurements doing, how kind of am I progressing in the gym, and I'm taking that into combination with my calorie intake. So big thing I want to see is my scale weight is going up over the long term. So on average, over every like 2-week period, there should be a bit more weight. I like around a 1% addition of body weight per 2 weeks on average. Now, if that's kind of, you don't exactly hit that, then that's fine. But along with that, I don't just like to see weight to go up for the sake of it. If you're not performing well in the gym, if you're not feeling good, then that comes into it as well. So if my weight starts to stall, then I will increase calories. It's more of a kind of a reactive thing. I'm not necessarily just forcing more calories in for the sake of forcing more calories in and being proactive about it, because I know sometimes I'll hit like, I don't know, it might be 3,500 calories, and that will take me from 170 pounds up to 180, and I won't have had to have changed anything. My body will just kind of do it gradually over that time course. But maybe at 180, then I have to force feed because I am then at my like higher end of where my settling point likes to be, and so I have to like force more and more in it. It can be quite shocking at times how far you have to push it because the body adapts pretty hard once you get up to a certain point.
Yeah. And like one thing we've said about muscle gain being very slow, and now it is very subjective, but in my first few years of training, clothes were a massive way of saying that I was progressing. Now this can be, you can't just put on half a stone of weight like you said, but for example, if your clothes, your delts are feeling a wee bit tighter, your t-shirt, your adductors are pretty tight to your jeans, like that's a small sign of progression and getting bigger.
No, yeah, definitely. I think clothes are a good one, especially kind of, and then you know the waist. If the waist is getting tight and nothing else is, you're like, oh,
Yeah,
damn it,
yeah,
it's not great.
yeah. No, yeah, 100%. But definitely in my early days, I just found that when you jump to a small to a medium, like that is a
Yeah,
big mark in terms of your t-shirts or whatever. Now, anyone listening to this, you can jump to a small to a medium in a fat way. You can put like
yeah,
I could probably do that in 2 weeks if I went to Domino's every night or something. But I do think that anyone listening to this, like don't we've he mentioned about calories, mentioned about weight, went about measurements, how you look, things like that. We've also mentioned about like insulin sensitivity. Like you could even go to, I know guys are now measuring the rest and blood glucose for that. But as well, just the basics, like clothes, it can be some way of form. And as Steve said, like don't take any of these in isolation. So Steve mentioned about there's no point pushing up weight and pushing up calories if performance is shit. Like the be all end all is we're going into a gym and we're trying to get stronger and perform better and more efficient. How we do that. So like that would be one of the main variables that I would say, like especially to focus on within your first few years of training. Like you can't like someone that's brutally strong, even if, for example, you're not privileged enough to have the best technique in the world, like you still will have some degree of serious muscle mass. Like if someone's squatting several plates, like they will have big legs.
No, yeah, you touched on good points there. I agree. There's no point. You can't force feed muscle growth. That's a key take home.
Yeah, 110%. And then, man, so when you do a lot of mini cuts with a lot of your guys, so what is a mini cut, and when would it be beneficial, and how to set one up?
Cool. So a mini cut is, as it really sounds, it is a small cut. I kind of relate it to being like a bank robbery. You try and get in, go hard, aggressive, get as much body fat as you can, and get out quickly. Like you're not hanging around in there. You're not doing you're not doing a supermarket shop. You're at bank robbing. You're robbing a bank. So the key is knowing that you're in a point at which you don't want to do a mini cut and then cut afterwards. I think that is a different thing, and my kind of definitions of mini cuts have kind of changed as Mike Israetel has kind of come out with his own thoughts on mini cuts and the way he plans them. I used to very much use them as kind of basically I just thought of it as an aggressive dieting period, and that could potentiate further dieting in future because you get a good amount of client buy-in. They see a lot of weight loss initially, and we know when your body fat levels are higher and you're at that initial point in your diet, you can get away with more fat loss. Now, the way I typically now use them, more so for the guys who are kind of using mini cuts more in a kind of phase potentiated manner for massing, is when you're kind of getting to a point at which we talked about where you are seeing a bit of kind of maybe that anabolic resistance, maybe you are getting to that higher body fat percentage, but you're not so high, you're maybe at that 15% for someone who maybe is fluctuating in that realm, and you can diet down over a period of maybe, I probably would say less than 3 weeks. You're seeing a lot of just glycogen moving around and you're not really seeing much fat loss. So, and then up to maybe 8 weeks, probably more so 3 to 6 weeks of aggressive dieting. So you're aiming for like 1%, maybe up to 2%, and maybe a 1.5% drop in body weight per week on average. So you can get really quite aggressive with this because the body, we talked about it adapting, but your metabolism and kind of all these catabolic things don't really take place in such a short period of time. You can get quite aggressive because it is so short. And in this time, you're kind of potentiating yourself nutritionally because you're bringing body fat levels down and you're bringing just calorie intake down. So that's going to drive up insulin sensitivity for a mass coming out afterwards, which is great. But you're also, if you're doing it kind of in the right way, minimizing training volumes. You're coming down into like just the amount of volume you need to sustain your muscle growth, nothing crazy. So you can also bring down kind of training fatigue. So again, you're kind of resensitized to both your training and your nutrition, so it actually potentiates further massing in future, so then you can mass afterwards. That's generally how kind of mini cuts go, without getting to like specifics of kind of like macronutrient breakdown and things like this.
Let's just put a disclaimer so that no one takes this really badly. Define aggressive, because I don't want anyone going away having a chicken breast, 2 almonds, and broccoli every single meal just because Steve Hall says I need to diet aggressively.
You know what? I think Martin McDonald, when he came on my podcast and actually talks about this, and he says diet, when you're doing kind of a mini cut, or actually I think for him just general dieting, he says diet as aggressively as you can, and by that he means can sustain. So if you can sustain a very aggressive diet, meet your protein requirements, and you can not have bad training performance, then you can drop a lot of fat very quickly. People will find that if they go more aggressively than like that 1 to 2% of body weight loss per week, they're going to see performance come down. They're going to end up maybe binging. So I think for most people, and because we're on podcast, a lot of people listen to this, aim for that 1% of body weight per week. So if you are like that 170 pound guy or 180 pounds, then that is like 1 to 2 pounds per week would be an absolutely fine rate. And if you are doing a mini cut, like doing that, and you can lose a lot, like you could do, if you're losing 2 pounds a week over the course of 6 weeks, that's 12 pounds, like you're almost losing a stone. So you can get pretty good results via that. But yeah, like you said, you don't want to just like starve yourself, because that's not going to end in the way you want it to.
And one thing definitely that Steve said is, like, if you start to notice, and say for example you get something out of this that you want to go on a mini cut, get in, get out. When there starts to become a high level of food focus, so Steve said about binging, stuff like that, that's where you know you're in the danger zone and you need to bring things up. But you need to take things a step back in terms of bringing calories up and whatnot. But yeah, it was just really clarifying that because that sort of message could be taken in any manner.
Yeah.
Again, we're here to help you guys. So we want it to be really crystal clear so that you can take these points into action and stuff. I've actually, I was at Martin's seminar in September, the conference, and it was all on getting the single digit body fat. And yeah, that's his sort of method is go as low as you can go. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, there is, with everything we're talking about, there is a degree and there is a context and there is factors to take into consideration. Right, so I am really we've talked about a lot, and I'm a bit wary of Steve's time and whatnot. So what I would like to finish off with is some podcast ping pong. So just to kind of sum up how everything's went and whatnot. So the way the podcast ping pong works is that for 30 seconds, me and Steve are going to have a rally, and we're basically going to say, you need to remember, and then a point that we've covered. Okay, and we're going to try and get as much as possible so that you can go away with some key points. Okay, so I'm just going to set the timer. Right, let's go. You go first, Steve. You need to remember.
Keep the goal the goal.
You need to remember that bulking and gaining muscle mass is a slow process, going uphill and then downhill. Your go.
You can't force feed muscle growth.
You need to remember that your body adapts when you're gaining, just like dieting, but it won't adapt to the same degree, and it'll adapt through things like heat.
When you're training, you need to make sure you can make things hard and harder over time and progressively track that.
You need to remember that it's okay to take a step back from progressing and going on a maintenance phase or dropping training volume.
Mini cuts are like a bank robbery. You want to get in and out as quick as possible.
You need to remember that a gaining phase doesn't just mean about gaining as much weight as possible. And as if we're saying 1% every 2 weeks, that's a decent framework.
Deloads are important to drop fatigue.
You need to remember that last one. You need to remember that everyone has different body fat settling points where they perform well. So thank you very much, Steve, for coming on. Steve gives out a wealth of information on his podcast, on social media, on his new website, which is amazing. He actually has a coaching team with another guy called Pascal. So where can the listeners find you, Steve?
So yeah, thank you so much. It's been a really fun chat. If people want to find us, our tag is basically Revive Stronger anywhere. But revivestronger.com, you can find articles, you can find our podcast, you can find our coaching services, and also on Instagram we put out a lot of information. So Revive Stronger over on Instagram, that's our main places. So that'd be brilliant.
Also check out Steve's gaining journey. He documents a lot of what he does, and it's very interesting. I'm sure you'll take a thing away or two. So again, guys, thank you very much for tuning into the podcast today. Just the fact that you're taking a bit of time out of your day to learn from us means a lot to both of us. If there's anything that you haven't understood and you would like for me to explain a wee bit further, or even ask Steve to explain a wee bit further, we'd be more than happy to. And if there's anyone as well that you feel would benefit from these podcasts, please do share. The only way this podcast can grow is from your support, and this podcast is for you, to help you and whatnot. So thank you, and I hope to see you all next week.
Cheers.
Cheers. Way.